Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Disc parking in town centres, the standing of the classic TT, and delaying surgery for smokers and those who are classed as obese were all up for discussion on the programme. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Is the classic TT becoming a key fixture for road racing fans? The enhanced position of the classic TT in the racing calendar has been underlined at the bike show in Birmingham, apparently. Clerk of the course Gary Thompson says there are some technical changes which teams and riders need to be aware of, though. But the standing of the races is growing. How do you see it? Has the classic TT now established itself in the racing calendar, or does it still have some way to go? This year, the classic TT was on the same bank holiday weekend as the British Superbikes at Cadwell Park. Road racing has enough star names to stand on its own, and the racing was superb at both events, says Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. Classic TT is an expensive farce created by DED Motorsport team to give them something to do, says somebody else. I expect that the truth is somewhere between those extremes. Stu, all but the top teams have been taking the classic TT seriously since it began, as DED stole their races from the MGP. What a kick in the teeth this has been for small team racers, who it's obvious are considered by the organisers only here to make up the numbers. Last year we saw someone, I'll not say who because I'm not sure about the legality of it, win the race with an oversized fuel tank, yet the organisers turned a blind eye. That from Chris. I don't know enough about road racing, Chris, to know whether or not that's something that I can actually repeat naming names. It'd be great if they brought the classic sidecars to the classic TT. Okie dokie. So they don't have classic sidecars there. All right, keep your thoughts coming in. It's obviously an important fixture for the Isle of Man every year. But is it important to road race fans? Is it bringing in more people than it used to? I think the official figures say that it is, but what's your feel for it? Get in touch and tell us. So we can go to the lines and have a word with Ian about the classic TT. Hello, Ian. Do you think it's become a preeminent event?
Not yet. I think there's two major problems to get it into that sphere, if you like.
Okay.
And that is one, which they're starting to address, I think, is the blatant cheating that went on last year.
Right.
Or this year, I should say. Everybody was talking about the cheating. They weren't talking about the races. They were talking about the cheating. Okay. And I think that, like I say, I think they've started to think about that and possibly address it with the regulations.
Good.
The other thing is the number of entries that we're getting. I marshal at Governors, and talking to the spectators there, the biggest complaint they had was that it's all right seeing the odd top fella come round, but the poor lads at the back end who are struggling are not likely to come again if A, they see the cheating, and B, they don't get any recompense for their efforts, because they ride round England on the circuit, so to speak, and they ride in and week out with their classic bikes.
Yeah.
The classic bikes are very expensive to maintain, and they put a lot of time and effort into it. When they come to the TT, it's even worse because of the length of the races, but they're not getting the recompense for coming over.
But that's motorsport through and through, isn't it? I mean, I used to race cars and I never got paid once, and it's horrendously expensive at any level, even if you only do cheap Formula Ford, it costs a fortune.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The thing is, though, what the government are doing are paying out fantastic sums to the top riders.
Yes.
And the others are being forgotten.
But isn't that a case of just trying to build the brand by paying for the stars?
I don't think all the spectators want to come and see just the stars. They want to see proper racing.
Yes.
And when somebody comes over with a patent replica or an MV3 replica that's cost well over £100,000, and they're racing with maybe a Trident or something like that, there's such a big difference. So I'd like to see a bit more help going to bring the ordinary runner, if you like, the ones that compete week in and week out, the likes of Michael Dunlop and company, they don't race classics on a regular basis.
Right.
And I think the spectators that come over want to see proper racing.
Proper grassroots racing. Do you not think, though, Ian, that might be a dangerous precedent if people get paid to come over? I mean, let's face it, you race classic motorcycles because it's your hobby and your passion. Yeah. But to only do it if you get paid, I mean, it's a bit like paying marshals. I mean, marshals do a fantastic job, and many people think that they ought to get paid. But if you were to do it, it would set a dangerous precedent, wouldn't it?
I'm not saying they pay them pounds in the pocket. I'm saying that everybody should be treated equally, and if there's help in getting them over on the steam packet, if there's help with accommodation, things like that. I'm not saying they should turn around to somebody and say, here's £2,000.
Yeah,
come
right,
and enjoy
okay.
yourself.
Gotcha.
I'd much prefer to see it in bringing the grassroots to the island who do it on a regular basis.
Yes.
We'd have, some of the races with the breakdowns, there was only a few finishing.
Yeah.
And it was, this is what, like I said, the spectators were saying to me, is we'd prefer to see more bikes out than the top ones out.
Than just the big names who are, just doing it for a lark sort of a thing, Yeah. Okay, no, some good points there, Ian. Thanks very much for getting in touch. The Classic TT organisers have eaten into the MGP programme again. 2 more classes have been dropped from the MGP next year. They've dropped the 125 and 400s. Okay, it may only have a small grid, but was a learning curve for riders starting road racing. Maybe they're planning to bring classic sidecars to the event and need the time and space. I don't know enough about it to know for sure. Really enjoy the classics, proper noises, and even better, proper smells. Castrol R, I don't suppose you get that so much with modern bikes, but yes, the smells of the paddock, I know exactly where you're coming from. The changes for the MGP 400 class is the decision of the Manx Motorcycle Club, nothing to do with the classic TT. Okay. Stu, I saw this about the TT in the Telegraph, and whoever it was sent me a link, which I've just opened, and it seems to be one of those advertorial things for a double glazing company about how to keep out the noise of road racing during the TT, if it offends you. Right then, Andrew, our East Coast correspondent from the USA, who comes over at every TT in Marshalls at Bray Hill, says, just tuned in, not sure if this point's relevant. There needs to be an overarching brand, more cooperation, coordinated marketing, and less competition between the organisations. Isleman Festival of Motorcycling, Classic TT, Manx GP. I received communications from each. I think you make a very good point. The brand, that's what's important, isn't it? The brand. Cheating at the TT and Classic TT are well known. Example, at TT, a 600 was witnessed as illegal, but a blind eye was shown due to the rider and race sponsor. Mickey Mouse D was disqualified, yet another was not. Money talks. Classic TT is working well and becoming increasingly attractive. Now the organisers need to get all the Classic TT curbs painted as they were up to, but not after the TT centenary. Visit Paint the Curbs on the Course now on Facebook. Okay, from John in Port St Mary. Paint the Curbs on the Course now. Apparently a Facebook group. Who'd have thought? This is an interesting text. It says, hi Stu, Gary here, clerk of the course. Thank you for getting in touch, Gary. Everybody's talking about apparent cheating in the Classic 500 with oversized tanks. There was no cheating. Dispensation had been given for both bikes to compete, i.e. the Pattern and the MV. This has been well documented and well communicated, but tends not to be mentioned when applicable. Thanks for getting in touch. So no cheating then. Another comment, some of these top riders are getting enhanced start money at TT to compete at Classic TT. Some tens of hundreds of thousands. We'll never get the truth if the event's making a profit, if payouts are being booked to the main TT. These top riders don't race for free like the MGP riders. Okay, I don't know much about it, and again, I've heard various stories from the man in the pub about vast amounts of start money paid to the top teams or whatever. If you look at the poster for a lot of sort of events, if you looked at a variety show event, Sunday night at the London Palladium, People at the top get paid a huge amount of money to be there. The people at the bottom of the bill get paid a fraction of that. So it's always going to be the case that the big names are going to attract money, and the people at the bottom might even end up doing it for free to just get the exposure or to just have fun with it. So I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. And it could well be, despite what we heard earlier on, that fans might well say that they want to see the local fellows racing or the small teams competing, but actually research might well prove, what research can prove, it might well prove that people need to see big names in the publicity to make it, we'll go then. If Michael Dunlop's racing, if John McGuinness is racing at it, then we'll go and we'll have a look at it. So it might work. I don't know. Hi, Stu. Gary Thompson's quite right. In their exit says the organisers can change the rules at their discretion. Hardly fair, says Chris. Well, I think that's probably the sort of phrase that's in all sort of motor racing terms and conditions, really. I think competitors get involved in those events with that in mind. Let's just hope that the organisers make any of these decisions for the good of the event rather than for individuals involved. And why would they do anything that was against the interests of the event?
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
A health authority's plans to delay surgery for smokers or obese people has been approved by NHS England for the first time. The Vale of York Clinical Commissioning Group insists that patients will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis from January. Several other NHS trusts have already begun restricting services like cataract surgery or IVF treatment because of funding concerns. Is this something that the Isle of Man should consider? Or would it be unfair? It sounds the thin end of the wedge to me. I wonder whether or not one of these medics who makes decisions like that, if they phone a plumber and say, I've got a leak, and the plumber says to them, you didn't lag your pipes, therefore we're not going to turn out, how they'd feel about it. Surely the whole idea of the NHS is that services are provided to people who need them when they need them, without having to jump through an awful lot of hoops first. Or does it make more sense to suggest that there are sometimes things that people can do to reduce the amount of effort needed to get them well again? We've got Eddie on the line who wants to talk about this NHS story. Hello, Eddie.
It's frightening, isn't it, when you think about it? I remember quite a while ago saying to you something about they did a survey over here and they asked the kids in the school, to write down what they, like a list.
Yeah.
Of what they thought, a question and answer thing, and it was all about drugs in schools and things.
Yeah.
And at the time, the point I was trying to make was the kids actually put loads and loads of rubbish things down in that survey, so they're never ever going to get a true survey out of it.
Yeah, okay.
But it's going to be the same here, isn't it? I mean, when people are asked to fill in a form and things, have you ever smoked? No. They're going to say no, aren't they?
Well, if that means that you're not that you're going to get the surgery that you need, whereas to tell the truth means that you're not, it's very tempting.
Become, dishonest, really, because if you've paid into these things, you get these people who say, "I've paid in all my life, so I'm entitled to it."
Yeah.
But now that we know as much as we do know, we actually know that if you have a bag of crisps, it's going to shorten your life because they're bad for you.
I wouldn't mind. I don't know how you feel about this, Eddie. I wouldn't mind if the medic said, right, okay, we're going to get you in to do this surgery to do your hips or whatever it might be, and it's going to be 6 months away, and really, we'd like you to lose a load of weight by then and give up smoking. That wouldn't be so bad, because, what they're suggesting makes perfect sense medically. We understand that. But to say to somebody, well, no, if you're a smoker or you've got, or you're overweight, then no, you're going to have to be put to the back of the queue. I think that's wrong. And it begs a bigger question for me, this. I don't know whether or not this sort of crosses your mind as well. I reckon that the current generation probably pays more tax than any generation before it. In terms of our disposable income and all the rest of it. I think that the proportion of our earnings that go in tax is probably the highest it's ever been for the ordinary working person now. I'm not talking about people who pay super tax and stuff. Where's it all going? Because the NHS in England, certainly England and Wales, and to a lesser extent the Isle of Man, is skinned. They say that they've not got enough money to do the job that they're there to do. Why not? Where's all this tax going?
Yes, pharmaceuticals pharmaceuticals are so expensive. I mean, over the last 3 or 4 years, they've started sourcing from different pharmaceuticals, aren't they? Because they find that they've been overcharged for donkey's years with a lot of the drugs. But what really gets me is the fact, I mean, I know a few people who've had operations and have actually lied on the thing, do you smoke?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to end up that way with everything. I mean, do you drive a car? Biggest polluter, it pollutes everybody, that. Another one is like you were saying about weight loss. The only reason why they say, you're going to have to lose some weight is because it can endanger your chances during the operation.
Sure.
You know, that's why that one comes in, isn't it? But, I mean, where are they going to draw the line? I mean, it's a bit silly.
Well, I mean, if I was down for surgery or something, and the consultant said, trouble is, Stu, you're overweight, and therefore, we're going to stick you to the back of the queue, I would rather sign a piece of paper that says, if I die because I'm overweight, then it's on me. It's my fault. I accept that. But
you're renowned for that.
well, the whole thing bothers me.
The sound of things anyway. You keep telling us all these things. You're giving too much away.
I know. Well, that's the one that, I mean, you can lie about smoking, but you can't lie about being obese, I suppose, can you?
what I'm trying to get at is that before long you'll be admitted into a hospital and somebody will be there alongside the nurse doing a questionnaire
with a clipboard.
With a clipboard. and you will be telling them a pack of lies because you will be so familiar of what can go wrong if you put the wrong thing down.
Well, and for me, Eddie, that's the rub as well, because, there seems to be enough money to employ people with clipboards, but not enough money to employ people who are medically trained. So
that'll be on 35 a year.
Yeah, well, absolutely. All right, some good points there. Thanks for getting in touch, Eddie. Where are all our contributions going then? Taxed on this, taxed on that, insurance, taxes from smoking, or some of them go to the NHS, says Carol. I think probably all of them go to the NHS, effectively, yeah. Without smokers, the NHS would be even more underfunded. And it bothers me. I mean, it's just a wider picture, and we're not just talking about the NHS, but there are so many things now that governments across and here say, well, we just can't afford it. We've got to tighten our belts. Where's all the money going? Because I'm pretty sure that we're all paying a lot more tax. The average working man and woman is probably paying more tax than at any other time in history, I would have thought. Where's all that money going? Because it's not going on public services, and that's the whole idea of it. Is it all going to just keep the machinery of governments active? I don't know. 44 million went on public sector pensions, will increase even more this year. That should be spent reducing the increasing length of time that people are having to wait for operations, not feeding highly paid civil servants, says Steve. Trouble is, Stu, that there are a lot more workers on low wages and so won't be paying into the pot but drawing from it. I don't know that that's true. I mean, it's a good theory. I don't know that it's true. If you look back over the years, there were always, I would have thought that there would have been more low-paid people before minimum wage than there are now. Factory workers and people like that. Stu, although I don't begrudge anyone medical treatment, surely when there are scarce resources, treatment has to be prioritised, says David H. Well, yeah, but why are there scarce resources? That's the question about that. Where is the money going that we're all paying into the system to keep this going? And, if that's the case, that we can only prioritise things, are we funding the NHS properly? Or should the question be, basically, if you want a fully functioning national health service, you're going to have to pay an extra 5% tax and we'll take a vote on it, shall we? Stu, it fascinates me that the number of obese and smoking clinicians telling you to stop smoking and to lose some weight, smelling of smoke and rather rotund themselves. The saying, physician, heal thyself, comes to mind, says Howard. Well, yeah, that's true. Stu, wonder if the guest at the Derby Hilton would be refused hospital treatment for being fat or a smoker. Think not, says Roy. Well, yeah. There is, I've noticed a few of these Facebook memes recently where it is suggested that actually we look after our prisoners at the Derby Hilton better than we look after our pensioners. And that is a cause for concern, isn't it? Having said that, I don't particularly fancy doing any time incarcerated at Derby. But, it is maybe a valid thought, isn't it, that somebody who's in prison would get straight to the head of the queue in terms of dentists or doctors or whatever, whereas the rest of us have got to wait. I don't know what the answer is to that, to be honest. Stu, I think smokers should be the first to get medical assistance, as they've paid a massive tax on their cigarettes, which goes to the government. What do they then do with it? Yeah, okay. Smokers should go to the top of the queue given the amount of tax they pay, says Wendy H. Same for alcoholics, but not the users of non-taxed illegal drugs. It's a bit like St. Peter at the pearly gates, that deciding who comes in or not, though, isn't it? What else have we got? NHS costs. It's simple. Previously, when you retired, you died. Now, when you retired, one survived, and that costs a lot of money to keep all those survivors alive. That from Stuart. Is that what it is, do you think? Just that people are living longer and therefore there's no money? Maybe the whole system is flawed then. Maybe the whole system is predicated on out-of-date data. And really, somebody needs to sit down and say, OK, well, to carry on providing the sort of public services that people have got a right to expect for the taxes that they pay all the working lives, then, either that amount of tax needs to go up or people need to get less out of it. But people need to be taken along with that rather than these what seem to be arbitrary decisions by certain health authorities or whatever. I feel that nowadays all the money goes on all the services that are expected from governments, whereas previously people accepted responsibility for their own affairs, and as far as pensions and old age care are concerned, that will have to return. Okay, fair comment. And Sue says via Facebook, is it not against their human rights to discriminate against them because of their weight? If it isn't, it should be. Oh, now there speaks a slim person.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Are times allocated for disc parking right? The Infrastructure Minister has vowed to consider any parking initiatives that support island retailers. Ray Harmer made the comments in the House of Keys yesterday. He was responding to a question from Ramsey MHK Laurie Hooper, who asked Mr Harmer if he'd review parking time restrictions in disc zones in town centres to support retailers. Is 2 hours long enough for parking in most places? Should it be extended, or would a shorter period encourage more footfall in town centres? Tell us your thoughts on this. I have to say, it's one of the beauties, one of the joys of living in the Isle of Man, the fact that you can park for free on so many of our town streets. I think the disc zone idea is a great one because across pretty much everywhere you go, there are parking meters or pay and display machines or whatever, and I expect that will come to the Isle of Man at some point, but for now, I think the disc zone thing works pretty well. And there are different times, aren't there? As Chris was saying earlier on, there are some spaces that are only 30 minutes. There are others that are an hour and a half or 2 hours. Do you think that they're pretty well planned out the way they are, or do you think there needs to be change? And one of our regular malcontents is first past the post today with a comment, climbed from under his or her stone to send this in. I don't know why they bothered. Lots of Scotland has free parking in the towns, also Ireland, so stop peddling your myths. Heaven forbid that I would ever say anything nice about the Isle of Man. Stop peddling your myths about free parking. Right then, okay, back under your stone. Personally, I think the disc zone parking should be longer, but at a cost. Say 2 hours free, then £1 an hour afterwards, so you don't have to rush back after 2 hours or whatever. Well, I think the idea of the disc parking is for sort of temporary, it's not for people to park up all day, is it? And that's the problem. I think that a lot of people tend to use disc parking zones to go to work and to park all day and fudge it by sort of swapping the discs around or moving the cars around or whatever. And that's not the idea at all. It's really for people to come into town to shop or to do short visits or whatever. And I can't think of anything that takes more than 2 hours, really. If I'm ever shopping, in and out in 10 minutes usually. So I think that 2 hours is more than enough time for pretty much anything. I mean, if you wanted to meet somebody in town for lunch, 2 hours is enough time for that, isn't it? And I suppose that it starts to get complicated if you're going to mix free parking with paid for parking, because then you get into, well, do you have to buy tickets or do we have to have machines or whatever? So I don't know. Parking in Douglas should be pay and display for all. Tradesmen who have to park in Douglas have to pay the government for every time they park through a scratch card system, £1.50 per park. If you have a few different jobs to do during the day, it gets expensive. Well, surely that's one of the costs that you pass on to your customer, though, isn't it? Bring in the parking meters, cut back on traffic wardens, it'd save the taxpayer and produce revenue. Fact, is that from Frank? I don't recognise the number. I don't think it is. Manx Museum in Douglas is free parking but limited space. It's abused by out-of-towners who park there all day and head off to work. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Result, no parking for visitors to the museum. 2 hours free parking is brilliant. We don't know we're born, she says. Well, I agree with you, Jane, but it should be extended to the big car parks too. That's why we've always got spaces available at Shawsbrow and Chester Street. That would really encourage local shopping, but the fine should be bigger. OK, thank you. And then 2 thoughts from disgruntled men. 2 hours enough, be sensible, Stu. Have you ever been shopping with a female of the species? That from Cliffy. And Pete says much the same thing. 2 hours enough for parking in a shop? When did you last shop with a woman? Well, it's been a while. I was thinking about it. I've been single for quite a while now for exactly that kind of reason. I think I spent 25 years in relationships. And I've got a friend who stayed resolutely single through most of that time. And I could never understand it. I said, do you not get lonely? He said, nah. He said, the thing about women, he said, you can't live with them, can't live with them. I think that in many ways he was probably right. Your discussion on parking in the Isle of Man, my comments are aimed at parking on Douglas Prom. If the wholesaler staff and hotel staff didn't park up all day and adjust the discs every 2 hours, then there'd be plenty of free parking for the shoppers. As a taxi driver, I've watched these people changing the time on their discs. They should be ticketed if they're still on the lock prom after 2 hours. Okie dokie. I think that the parking controllers do kind of look out for people doing that. That's from Keith. Thank you, Keith. And Graham says, hey boy, park at the hospital and get a lift to work. Well, there were suggestions some time ago that the car park at Nobles Hospital, at the new Nobles, is full constantly from early in the morning till late at night, and it can't all be people going to the hospital. I don't know. I've got a feeling that they sort of clamped down on it to try and make sure that people weren't parking there all day. So hopefully they've done that and made sure that people aren't abusing the system there. I mean, that really is pretty low, isn't it? If you're going to use a hospital parking space to save a few quid and make somebody have to walk miles who might be on crutches or whatever. So none of my listeners would do that, certainly. Not me, says Frank. I hate parking meters. Oh, quelle surprise. Traffic wardens, pay and display, the only things that need doing are an all-island 2-hour disc zone and the allowance of those who have vans as their only vehicle to be able to park the same as cars. Do you have a van, Frank, I wonder? I.e. on the prom where it states cars only, and those are facts, opinions and ideas, says Frank. Right then, OK. Stu, my way of to deal with parking in Douglas, just don't go there if you can possibly avoid it, says Mick. Mick, was it Samuel Pepys who said that any man who's tired of Douglas is tired of life? Probably wasn't. It's our glittering metropolis, especially at this time of the year. We've got electric lights in the streets and everything. Tired of Douglas? Mike called. The answer's staring us in the face. Get on with building 2 or 3 multi-storey car parks in Douglas and Peel, etc. In Peel, there are existing car parks which they could put another 2 or 3 levels on top of. I'm sure that areas in Douglas are the same. Get on with it, then people can stop moaning about parking. I agree. I think it's crazy. The trouble is that we've got all these sort of eco-warrior planner types who do little models of town centres that seem to be full of trees and pedestrians and trams and buses, and they don't seem to allow for cars. I think that at town planning school they must have decided years ago that cars were going to have finished by now, that everybody was going to be walking to work instead. Sadly not the case, and it seems that there is an undersupply of facilities for car drivers, and most people are car drivers. And there are some great sites. I mean, I had to walk into Regent Street yesterday, the day before, Monday, and I was amazed at that site, excuse me, opposite Regent Street Post Office, as was, and it's just completely derelict. I mean, all you need are some empty sort of cardboard boxes and you could film a car chase from the Sweeney in there. It's ridiculous. It's all boarded off. A prime centre site like that. I mean, that'd be a great car park, multi-storey car park there. And I'm sure it would reinvigorate the whole of Strand Street. And it's been like that for as long as I can remember, certainly since 97 I think it's been empty. Something ought to be done about it. Now, I know that probably the bank next door owns it, and if you own a piece of land, it's up to you whether or not you do something with it. But if they're not going to do anything with it, I think that the council or the government ought to do a compulsory purchase order on it and say, we're going to build a car park there. And I think it would change the fortunes of Strand Street absolutely dramatically, personally. Disc parking was brought in so that you could park near the business area. I think it was Tony Brown, who was the minister, who said it was not going to be like the UK, but now it's out of control and become a cash cow for government. Do you think so? I mean, if you park in a space and you know it's only for an hour or 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it might be, and you exceed that, then surely you've got to expect a ticket. And I have to say, there are times that I've exceeded me time on me thing, and I've got away with it. So I can't, I think I've had one ticket in 3 years on Athol Street, and I park there every day, and there are occasions that I do exceed me time, I suppose. And I think I've only had one ticket, and you just got to pay it. It's just the cost of using a service like that, isn't it? There should be parking for commercial vehicles on all roads where disc parking is. If I'm working in Athol Street, for example, and there's no spaces, I have to walk with tools from as far as the prom sometimes. Much as I like exercise, this adds time onto the customer's bill, says Rob. Okay. Both the Noble's main car park and the overflow across the road were absolutely chocker this morning, so I wouldn't be surprised if the problem is partly commuters, says Charles. Health department, I think we need to have another investigation into that. We need to have some checks to see whether or not people are abusing that. And basically, it's dead simple. If a car's there and it turns out to be somebody who's not there on hospital business, clamp it. And they've got to pay £200 to get the car away. Dead simple. That'd send the message out, wouldn't it? Andrew called, I still don't understand why they don't use the Summerland site for parking, run a bus back and forth on the prom every 10 minutes on a park and ride basis. Okay. No mention of park and ride, so this is Colin who's got the same idea, walking into town or using the regular bus routes. Some people don't think, and our poor taxi drivers are sat waiting for a fare. Tongue in cheek, I think, says Colin. Parking meters are the way. Watch this parking space. I think you're right. I think it is inevitable that we're going to end up having to pay for car parking because government is trying to squeeze the pips out of us. And all these things that have been free or subsidised or whatever are disappearing. I don't think they'll probably put parking meters up. I think what they'll do is to put the pay and display machines, 2 on every sort of parking space or whatever. I think that's probably the cheaper way to do it. So instead of putting a parking disc up, you've got to put a ticket in your windscreen that shows how long you've paid for. I think that's probably a more cost-effective way of doing it rather than the old-fashioned parking meters. Stu, we should go high-tech in Douglas and get the parking wardens to tell everybody where there are parking spaces or where it's full using social media, says Mike. I don't know whether or not that would be sort of timely enough. When they build a car park on the vacant prom site, put the bus station on the ground floor, then parking on the prom 1 hour only, says Peter D. Yeah, I mean, that site that I'm talking about at Regent Street there, it'd be fantastic for a bus station on the ground floor, wouldn't it? It'd solve all the problems, and then car parking above it. Van, 2 boats, yacht, car, so not just a van. Facts, Frank. Right. Okay, but you have got a van, that's what I said. If the retailers are so concerned, why don't they organise out-of-town parking with buses to town? It's not really something that should be down to the retailers, that, is it? In fairness. Hello, Brian.
I died yesterday.
Oh.
But I heard all the government had a big party and the noise of it brought me back to life. I've been listening to snippets of the programme here and there, Stu, and I have to say, successive governments have been really efficient at one thing and one thing only, wasting money.
Yes.
Now, in the 60s, when I got my driving licence, I was really privileged. I had this car that I bought it cost me two packs of cigarettes.
Yeah.
And had well ahead of my time. I had slick tyres on it and everything. But I was one of the few that had a car.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because, in those days, your road tax was dead cheap, everything was dead cheap. You could park anywhere you wanted.
Yes. And
the roads were in perfect condition. And here we are now. The island is awash with cars. There are more cars on this island per head of population than just about anywhere else in the world.
Well, including Peking, probably.
Including Peking. And every single one, well, no, not every single one, because 1 or 2 of my friends don't pay road tax.
Oh.
But most people, most law-abiding individuals, are paying the exorbitant road tax that
it is dear, yeah.
hit with now, and government are having to bring in contractors with heavy machinery to actually force the money into the bank, because it must be difficult, all these millions and millions of pounds coming in every year, and in the meantime, we're faced with all the garages around the island with big piles of scrap metal, which originally came from shock absorbers and springs and things that they're having to replace to the detriment of the world's resources because they can't maintain the roads.
Yes.
Now, how can you take as much money as they are doing in road tax and then say, oh, we haven't managed the problem?
Yeah, we haven't got enough money to do it all. Well,
previous, to do anything.
I think it was Phil Gorn was on the programme a year or so ago, and somebody got in touch and said, what happens to all this money that we pay in road tax or road fund licence? And he said that and more goes towards maintaining the roads. And I mean, I don't know where. Well, apart from the slot, but that was only £500,000. So it seems crazy, doesn't it?
Chicken feed. But then again, I was on Onken Commissioners, and I looked back at the history, and we signed over 400 and odd houses to the Department of Local Government of the day for 25 pence, and they've been collecting the rent and maintaining them ever since. And now there's a housing deficit. Well, put your blooming business head on and say to yourself, well, I provide housing,
yes,
and I try my very best most of the time not to make massive losses.
Yeah, I've got a theory about an elk. I've got a theory about this, which is that politicians in the Isle of Man had it too good for too long, and could just simply spend the way out of any problems, and they don't know how to resolve problems. A lot of them, without just saying, "All right, well, let's throw a load of money at it and get some consultants in."
Absolutely right, and there's the first problem.
Yeah.
They bring in the consultants to cover their own inadequacies.
Yes, yeah.
And their inadequacies are such that they can't tell that what the consultants are telling them is inadequate.
I have high hopes for the current, for the new administration, because I think that a lot of people have recognised that that's been the problem, and that we need to stop talking about all these things and stop messing about with fripperies and things that really government shouldn't involve itself in, and crack on with the real sort of desperate needs that the island's got.
I've heard about the pension crisis for years, but nobody's actually addressed it.
Well, they would say that they have, that they've finally sort of got a handle on it, but I know what you're saying, yeah. All right, Brian, thank you very much indeed.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
We're talking about free tram and train travel for pensioners. What do we think? Do we think that should be reintroduced rather than them being forced to pay half price? Let's go down to our Castletown correspondent. It's Neil. Hello, Neil.
Good afternoon, Neil. Good afternoon, Stuart. I think Carol Quine is absolutely right. I think it's a very important social issue. And I do actually take social issues quite seriously.
Yeah.
A friend and I were travelling on the tram to Ramsey last year, probably race week, I think, and Grand Prix is generally over. And there were two elderly ladies on the tram. They wanted to make conversation with us. We were chatting as we went along, right through to Ramsey. And it became apparent during the course of the journey that they were both in social housing. I think one was in Annika, one was in Pulrose. And once a week they meet up, and they're with 2 or 3 other friends, and they have a trip into Ramsey, enjoy a cup of tea at the Murik, and then get the tram home.
Yeah.
So I think I certainly don't resent a portion of my taxes being paid to accommodate such really very, very nice elderly people.
Okay, but I mean, they could have done it on the bus, because the bus travel's free, isn't it, for pensioners?
Yeah, but it's not as scenic, it's not as nice, and it's much more relaxing on the tram, to be absolutely frank. I mean, I use the tram, and not so much the steam train, but certainly the tram quite a bit. However, following yesterday's conversation, and Frank and myself, it's apparent that some of these elderly people who are living in large houses are actually quite smug about their wealth and their position on the island, with their buy-to-let homes, etc. They should darn well pay. I think they should actually pay for the privilege of going on the buses and the trams. But
yeah, but I mean, how do you do that then? Because you can't say certain pensioners that have got a few bob have to pay, and those who haven't got any money don't.
I don't see why not.
Well, because it then militates against people who've been careful all their lives. They've saved, they've made sure that they're not in debt, and they've saved up for the retirement. Why should they then be forced to pay for something that somebody who spent all the money all their lives gets for nothing?
Because very often a lot of these elderly women in particular have worked in social care. They've had poorer paying jobs. They've been cleaners or working in Tesco or somewhere. They haven't had the ability to save any money. That's not their fault. not everybody's able to get a degree like you and I. I mean, some people are limited by their sort of acumen.
Nonsense! I haven't got a degree. I've got 3 O levels, and 2 of those are in craft subjects.
Yeah, but you have a brain. You've been able to run a business in a past life, etc. You know, I mean, some people can't do that, and we have to have a social conscience and extend the hand of friendship and generosity and compassion out to people who are not as wealthy as some of the people who sent those smug texts in yesterday. I mean, it's all very well sitting in a nice house and having everything which, you know, has been provided by inherited wealth or the fact they've been able to run a business or etc. etc. But I work with people who are on the other side of the fence, who have absolutely nothing, who have 3 jobs, who are working 12 hours a day in 3 different jobs to try and make ends meet. And I know some of these elderly pensioners have worked very, very hard in mundane jobs. And I think the very least we can do as a society, and that's the underlying bit, as a society, I think the very least we can do is to ensure that they have some comfort in their old age.
I think that most people, most reasonable people listening to this would say absolutely that, you know, we don't mind helping people who need a little bit of help, but there are others who say, well, hang on a minute, you know, why is it always the same people who get all the help who've never done anything for themselves? Because, you know, yes, if somebody's on hard times or whatever, then they deserve to be helped along. But, you know, also people who go out and push themselves to do better and to put a few quid aside, they shouldn't necessarily end up worse off in the deal, should they?
I would agree to an extent, but I think it's a sad indictment on society as a whole that we don't care about the poorer people within the realms of society. And I do admire Carol. She's always been on one of my lists down here as a very good commissioner, and I actually voted for her and another member and at the recent general election. Unfortunately, she didn't get in, but no, she spelled it out very nicely. Those wealthy pensioners will continue to pay. Those poorer pensioners, such as the 2 very, very nice ladies that my friend and I were speaking to last year, will travel free. And as far as I'm concerned, the best of luck to them. I mean, got to have some comfort in later life.
Well, you would hope so, yeah. I mean, the other thought about this is that you chanced upon 2 very nice elderly ladies. You could have met a couple of battle axes who just gave you short shrift, so that might have changed your mind altogether.
Well, I've met a few battle axes, and at the same time, I can battle my way back. But at the end of the day, if somebody is on a very low income, and Carol also spelled out the mental health aspects of people being able to get out of their home and get out. I had an elderly aunt who was practically marooned out the other side of Port Sodrick at the age of 89. She couldn't drive. There was 1 bus a week, unless she got the school bus, which was early and very late for her. And being able to get out on the tram or the train for a day out was actually a wonderful thing to do, and we shouldn't knock that. Yeah. The worst aspect of getting old is people being on their own and isolated, and this is just one means of doing it. This is a wealthy island. There's plenty of people at the top. If the Manx government can accommodate tax cappers and people who have 4, 5, 6 or 20 separate homes which they can put into
trusts and things,
and trusts, etc., then the very least we can do is reach out the hand of compassion, generosity, and overall compassion for those people at the bottom end who don't have anything.
All right, Neil, thank you very much for your call. I think you're getting even more left-leaning than ever, especially after yesterday. I'm going to start calling you Comrade Neil, I think. But no, some good points there. If you would like to either agree or disagree with what Neil thinks about this, let's go back to the lines. We've got Dave on from Ballasalla. Hi, Dave.
All right, Stuart.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with what Neil said.
Oh, quelle surprise.
There are people out there, elderly people, living around here who really cannot afford to turn on their central heating because it's gas and the price of gas, and you know, they stay in bed until lunchtime. They go back to bed because that way they don't need to use the gas central heating.
Yeah.
And you know, you said, well, the people who save nothing through their lives. Well, if you think about it, what's the use of saving through your working life?
Well, it means that you can afford to put the gas on when you retire.
No, it doesn't. What it means is the government will take it all off you if you need to go into a care home.
Oh, yeah, there's that as well,
Well,
certainly, yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, but we can't all just throw ourselves on the mercy of the state and expect everything for free, because there's got to be somebody paying into the system.
The state have a responsibility to look after the people who actually put them where they are today by fighting in the two wars. Now, it's absolutely wrong to think of the elderly, as the government do, that they are a drain on the government.
I don't think government looks like that at all.
Those people are not. Those people have worked in jobs where they got infinitely less pay than a lot of people are getting today, and they've had to struggle through. And here we are now saying, well, because you did manage to save a few bob, because you did manage to do this, and, you know, now you need to go into care through whatever, we're taking all that off you. So what's the use of saving it?
Because unless some people do that, then the country's just going to go bankrupt, isn't it? Well, it's like a bucket of water with a big hole in the bottom.
No, it's not.
Of course it is. There's only so much money to go around, so if you make everything free for everybody...
elect 24 members
doesn't matter.
Of the House of Keys.
Doesn't matter,
and
Dave.
We elect them to do a job.
Yeah, but we've got to... Hang on, I'm going to fade you out, because we've got to give them the money to do that job, and if everything is free for everybody all the time, then they're not going to have the money to do the job, whether you elect them or not.
No, but then we can give tax-free on this and tax-free on that to companies.
That's a different matter.
No, it's not.
Of course it is.
At the end of the day, it's money coming into the government coffers.
But, you know, if they're going to do tax deals for high net worth individuals or for companies or whatever, it's because they're playing a long game and because it's a sprat to catch a mackerel, and the idea is that long term it brings in more than it costs.
Well, I don't see many mackerels. At the end of the day, Stuart, you know, the government view the elderly as a drain on the community, and that has been said not just once or twice, but many times.
Because and I think that the MHK who did say that a few years ago ended up losing his seat, didn't he? So, I mean, there's no two ways that was an unpalatable thing to say. But what he meant was quite right, that, you know, we can't just keep assuming that we can pay for everything that everybody wants.
Well, I tell you what, Stuart, you've got Willie Neal down there that lives in Hillside Avenue. He's 84, and I used to work with Willie, right? That guy said on your radio station, and in fact on your programme, the best thing to do, organise a bus up Gasworks Hill, we'll all jump off the cliffs there, throw ourselves off, and the government won't have a problem.
Oh, you're being a drama queen about it now, Dave. We're talking about free bus passes, free tram passes.
That is the reality of it. There are a lot of elderly people out there that the government don't know, that I don't know, that you don't know, and that other people don't know, who genuinely are suffering. Let us forget the fact that elderly people are a drain on society. Let us realise what the elderly people do and what they have done in the past.
All right, fair dues, Dave. Thanks very much for your call. I need to move out because we've got Quirky now on line 2, but I know that we battle sometimes, but David and I get on very well. DQ, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Just to put a little bit of balance on it, and I'm not speaking as a former member, but as a person there, the government, from what I've seen over a number of years there, has never treated the elderly as just something that shouldn't be there. Can I tell people out there, what they're doing is they're going to buy a new home down in Salisbury Street there, which is costing $6 million to look after us when we get older.
Yeah.
We're rebuilding Glenside. I just wish, and I know David very well, but I don't know the other fella. But at the end of the day, we've got to create that money. We've got to create that wealth to spend it.
That was the point I was trying to make. I think you probably made it better than me.
And the biggest issue is to sort the divide, if there comes one, between the younger generation, the middle generation, and the people who've got houses, and the people who live in subsidised dwellings and whatever is bring in means testing.
Yeah.
So if people are own their own house and they can struggle too, paying the rates and paying their bills as well, can be means tested to say, we'll help you out a little bit to make sure you survive in your own home.
Absolutely. So why has it not happened? Because government's been talking about means testing for donkey's years.
And I hate
Why?
to label it, it was the fault of Chris Roberts show. And if you get him on sometime, just say to him, he's the one that should have brought it forward donkeys years ago, a long time ago, the first session that I was in from 2006 on.
But I think he said that he's in favour of it, hasn't he?
Means testing.
Yeah.
But he never did nothing about it. It's all right being in favour of something, but we got a new person in there. Chris Thomas should be the one now that's bringing us forward, and we should be pushing it out there. It's a good mechanism if it's treated right and treated fairly across the broad spectrum.
All right, fair dues. Thank you very much, David. We've got Eddie to talk to in a second, but let's have a look at some of these texts and emails. I do wonder at times if the future pensioners of this world will have anything left to claim for. The current generation seem to want everything for free. We all pay tax, and we will do for longer than 65. Some kids till they're over 70, says John. Is Neil related to the Communist Party, asks Dave. He's leaning that way. I mean, yesterday and today, or was it the day before? Is it going to cost more if pensioners go on the trams and trains, or is it going to cost less if they don't? Right, well, that's a valid question, I suppose, isn't it? Perhaps the island's communists should consider moving to Russia, says David H. More important to me than the trams and trains is the pension. 2 years ago, over 65's tax thresholds were lowered, so that tax is now deducted from the state pension. We've heard nothing about that, says John in Ramsey. Good point. It's the result of globalisation, the transfer of work to wherever in the world it can be done by slave labour, and people in developed countries left to benefits minimum wage jobs. Trump is right about this, says John. Last year, when the free train and tram travel was stopped, I purchased a Platinum Go card, says Lindsay, which I got half price for 1 year's travel because I have a bus pass. This enabled me to continue to use the train and trams as much as I wanted. I appreciate not everyone will find this affordable or acceptable, but I personally feel that all these things have to be paid for somehow. And if pensioners were offered a yearly card for, say, 25 quid for unlimited travel on the train and tram, but keeping the free bus pass, I'd be happy to pay it to be able to continue to go out and about. Yes, the pass would mainly be used during the season, but I think it'd be good value. People then have the option whether they want to pay for this card or whether their use of the transport doesn't warrant it. By the way, I do really appreciate my free bus pass, as it's no longer affordable for me to drive everywhere and it gets me out and about. Thank you, Lindsay. Some good points in there. To the lines, and Eddie's here. Hello, Eddie.
Hey, Stu, all right?
Yes, I think so.
I've just been listening to quite a few points while I'm busy doing jobs.
Yes.
Two things, really. One, when you think about coming onto the show, you've got so many things you want to say, and by the time you get on and everything else, you seem to forget a few things.
Right.
And I think the likes of, what's his name, David from Barcelona, and Neil, sometimes forget some of the things. You know, they get involved with what they're trying to talk about or get over.
Yeah.
And I think they seem to be tending to, or leaning slightly to one thing, which was that they're both pensioners, I think, them guys, and they've paid in all lives.
Yeah.
So they feel as though they've done everything that they've been asked to do, like paying taxes and so forth.
Which is a valid point.
Valid point, of course it is, yeah. So they've done their little bit, as you say. Now then, the second point I wanted to make was that I think the last time you talked about this, somebody from the actual transport was saying that, you know, if we did make it free, they would then take with them people who would be paying.
Yeah.
And it would counterbalance itself.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe it would. So, roughly speaking, what we need to do is look at the actual estimate of what they think it's going to cost. Can't just say it costs an extra, like I think the tram lost 60,000 last year, was it, or something?
Well, to me, it's dead simple. If you've got empty seats, and obviously the main services, the busy services, you wouldn't do the concessions on. But for the rest of the day, if you've got trams and trains that are running half empty, then by all means, give people free seats on them. Don't have a problem with that at all, because it's not really going to cost any more. I just find some of the arguments a bit spurious. I mean, Dave was talking about the fact that we've got some pensioners, allegedly, who who spend 20 hours a day in bed because they can't afford to put the heating on. Now, to be honest, if you give them free train travel, it's not going to change that. And they're not going to be able to go to Ramsey and buy ice creams for the grandchildren because they're totally skint anyway.
Yeah. Well, this was my first point. I think they go a bit astray. They come on wanting to say one thing and then get sort of waylaid and start rabbiting on about other things. But what I was going to say was then, before you had a little bit, was if say, for instance, the trams last year, I presume I've heard it somewhere, the figure in my head, 60,000 quid they lost.
Okay.
Right, now that's not a lot of money when you think of what that other guy from the transport was saying, whereas it might bring in 60,000 if we had more people on the trams.
Right. Okay.
Right, so that counterbalance is nice. But the other point that nobody has mentioned is that these guys, I said right from the minute go, the 65 plus, paid in all their life. They've asked to, and they've done whatever the government have asked you to say. We have a younger generation today who some of them have never even got off the backsides to go out and do a work or pay any taxes, any insurance, so forth. Some of them, I believe, are living in flats around about £800 a month, which they pay. They don't hesitate in dishing all this money out. Now, how about if you means tested them lot? They haven't paid anything in.
Well,
all self-inflicted wounds.
That's the benefit of means testing, isn't it, Eddie? Because what it does is that you can look at somebody's situation.
I said it as a joke, I didn't mean it.
Well, I think that means testing is a good idea.
No, it's a bad idea, simply because all these 75-year-olds that I've just been talking about, they've answered the call, they've paid everything that they've been asked, and now you want to means test them. That's not fair.
Well, some of them have. You can't make sweeping generalisations. You can't say that everybody who's 65 has paid in all their lives and taken nothing out, whereas young people are taking out and not putting in. I'm
not saying all young people. What I'm saying is that we don't hesitate in giving them the methadone or whatever for when they've got self-inflicted drug problems. We don't hesitate in paying £800 a month for them because they've got nowhere to live, because they've pleaded,
well, that is the perception. I would suspect that the truth is somewhat different.
Well,
there is the perception that people can keep popping out babies to make more money and to abuse the system. I would suspect that it's a very small problem and that it's not as easy as people make out.
It's not. Nothing's easy, Stuart. But what I'm saying is, let's have a look at the figures. Let somebody from the government tell us how much it's costing for all the young ones who've never paid in, as against how much it's going to cost for the old ones who have paid in.
All right, well, that's a fair comparison, I suppose, in some ways. Yeah, all right, I need to move on, Eddie, but thank you very much for your call. And let's see what Ken makes of this. Hello, Ken.
Afternoon to you. The problem with this is, of course, we've got non-old age pensioners in the bracket we're talking about, because the government's got this rolling age thing, which isn't aligned with the old age pension anymore.
Right.
So basically, I'm nearly there for 62, so I'll be getting my bus pass. But, of course, perhaps they should look at it and go do a halfway deal and say, right, to get the bus pass, give us a couple of, a year or two notice and align it with the old age pension.
Oh, I see.
So you don't qualify until you're, 66.
Right.
Or 67 or 68, basically. I don't know whether that will cause a stir or not.
I don't know.
But the only other problem is somebody from the Department of Transport did say, of course, the trains are too busy at certain times, and probably it is in the summer. The train that leaves Douglas just before lunchtime is packed.
Yeah. Oh, well, you don't want to be doing free travel on trains or trams where you can be selling the tickets, do you? But I'm sure that there are plenty of services where they're half empty.
How do you manage that?
They will know which are the busy ones, won't they? So it'll be you get the free pass, except at these times.
Well, yes, which is trouble for the train. I think it's in the middle of the day, which isn't as easy as the bus pass.
Okay.
I'm
sure.
9 o'clock and after,
Yeah. I'm sure there's a way around it, Ken.
If somebody could come up with some figures, how many empty seats there are.
Yeah, okay.
But I think to go on about, denying, but there's lots of people like me probably who didn't fight in 2 wars was eligible for things.
Yeah.
Perhaps they should give it to the people who are, sick the old age pension and have a think about the lower age limit.
Okay, all right, some fair points there. Thanks for getting in touch, Ken. A really good response to this one today, so thanks to everybody for getting in touch on the phone. It's always nice to hear different voices. Doesn't matter whether I agree with any of them or not. It's just nice to hear different voices, and everybody's got a point of view. There's no right and wrong on this programme, really. And we've got a full inbox as well on this, so let's have a look at some of these comments. Well said, Neil, says somebody here. It's always the same, isn't it? Somebody will say something on the programme and you get half a dozen texts from people saying, he's talking rubbish. Half a dozen people saying, what's absolutely bang on. Perfect, I agree entirely. Stu, tell the do-gooder Neil that he's talking about the same people who get free nursing home care while the person with their own house gets shafted. Okay, government should sell off these liabilities such as the Villa, Gaiety and Manx Radio and put the money in the pension fund. Government thinking for you. Client single parent with their own small home. A mother takes ill and has to go into a home for constant care. Government come after the daughter for the cost of care, resulting in her having her home sold. Now she's been moved to a council house. Moral of the story is why work hard and save only for government to take it off you, says Pat. Well, that's the worry about that, I suppose, and that point's been made before, hasn't it? Better off getting rid of the ridiculous amount of overpaid civil servants that run this small island. Talk about pigs at the trough, only interested in themselves. Stu, our parents have worked hard all their lives, not been dependent on state housing or benefits, paid all the taxes, but now have the homes that should be handed down to the kids taken off them if they need care in later life. The elderly have already paid for the care. Elderly in care also lose the state pensions if put into care. Hang on, I told you that we were going to be bankrupt. You said rubbish. Now you're agreeing. Do you listen to every single word that I say to try and catch me out? Is that what that's about? It's not just the elderly. You're saying that there are so many people saying, oh, the Isle of Man's going to go bankrupt. Well, it is if certain things are done which people all want. And there is this expectation that government's got a bottomless money box that they can keep on providing things for free. And I'm making the point that if they do that, they'll go bankrupt. Not saying that they are going to do that. It's not just the elderly that can't afford to put the gas on. I know quite a few working people that sit with duvets on at weekends and evenings because of fuel costs. Also, it goes to show that the vulnerable on social security benefit are looked after when government announced a rent increase for tenants unless they're on social benefits. Well, I mean, that's why we've got a Department of Social Care, isn't it? And it strikes me that social services aren't doing the job properly if we've got people who are spending 20 hours a day in bed because they can't afford to get up and put the heating on. So surely that's down to social services to sort that out. That shouldn't be the case. There are at least 2 lottery winners on the island still living in social housing who should be means tested. Fact. Right, okay. I can't understand why anybody would do that. You know, if you won the lottery, why would you still continue to live in social housing and deprive somebody who needs it of that accommodation? I really do feel heartless saying it, but these aren't a social service, they're a leisure attraction. Now, here's a point. You get a tiny reduction on the full fare across on Heritage Railways being a pensioner, and here it's very generous, 50%. I think a return trip on the steam train is about 12 quid, so we're talking 6 quid for a 2-hour round trip. I think that's a bargain. Let's ensure we protect our elderly where it counts. That's good health care, good accommodation, free bus travel and a decent state pension. Now, I think that makes some very good points. Just to say that we received our pension yesterday, albeit in arrears, but the 40 quid Christmas bonus for each is gratefully received. That from Colin. Stu brings in means testing, good idea, but what about young people trying to get on the property ladder, struggling to pay rent on private accommodation, also saving for a deposit for a house? Government should bill first-time buyers at 0% deposit. Youth is the future, but also respect the elderly. Yeah, I think the government should be building lots and lots of first-time buyer houses, to be honest. I mean, it's probably the best investment that the government could make with our money, you would have thought. And it would solve social issues at the same time and maybe sort out the housing market in the Isle of Man a wee bit.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag #MRTalkingHeads. You can listen to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. That's it for now. So until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.